a panel discussion scheduled, which will be facilitated by Partha Ghosh. And the topic for the panel is strategy and challenges for innovating energy and the economy in Japan after the quake. So I'm going to turn it over to Partha and leave it in his good hands for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Once again, Kim, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to all of you to be here. Thanks to the speakers. I will just quickly summarize to sort of see what we have learned. As you could see, there was a wide range of topics we discussed. The last one, which my friend Takeuchi-san discussed, clearly talked about the softer side of Japan. How did Japan respond gracefully in a dignified way? And in the process, obviously, it has inspired, if you will, case studies, which perhaps we would like to see future generations to connect with. Which connects with what Bruce was telling me right now, where he was talking about the point I made about zero delay response. How to prepare individuals who, wherever they are, they could quickly respond to unexpected changes, because we cannot predict everything. That's the second point. Then the third point, what Bruce was talking about again in his presentation, in the short term, it seems like the choices is between LNG versus nuclear, and perhaps LNG, because nuclear has got some undefined questions as yet. And then we talked about the economics of Japan. And there I felt we were talking about how do we deal with a totally new demographic system. Because he talked about women coming into the labor force, we talked about foreign workers, we talked about foreign direct investments, and we also talked about perhaps how to maintain a balance of what should be in-source versus what should be outsourced. Clearly a question of paradigm shift, similar to questions perhaps the United States should be dealing with. And then when we talked to John, John's presentation talked about how do we deal with the next stage nuclear technology. So that's what we covered. So my first question would be to Takeuchi-san, because that's what is fresh in our minds. Because you did make a very important point when you talked about leadership and the article that you've handed out, that of the 10 leaders Harvard Business School has identified, all the 10 are from the eastern part of the world. In my presentation, which unfortunately missed, I had a slide which talked about how should Japan create the future incubators which integrates Eastern philosophy, and I talked about Eastern philosophy meant harmony with nature, versus Western philosophy to me is measurement-driven, transactional, which has also some value. How that could be integrated towards creating new corporates and new ways of governance. So my question is, what do you have to say on that? And by the way, I would like all of you to respond.
Okay.
Very difficult questions.
Thank you for the question. What's interesting is we submitted the article September of last year. And in the original article, we had names like Steve Jobs, Sam Palmisano of IBM, Jeff Immelt of GE in the draft. And a month and a half later, we got the reviewer's comment, basically the editor-in-chief of the Harvard Business Review, sent us a feedback saying, eliminate all these Western CEOs and make it a paper just on Japanese leaders. And we were stunned. We thought, unless we put in the Jobs and the Palmisanos and the Immelts of the world, our paper will not be accepted. So, of course, we knew the 9 Japanese leaders better than any of the Western leaders, but for us, it was a way to get our paper published, right? And for the Harvard Business Review to come back and say, eliminate these shocking, but we were very pleasantly surprised. And then, for those of you who kept the article, if you look at the front page, which is the cover page, we kind of understood why they wanted us to eliminate the Western leaders. Now, September of 2010 is 3 years after the leadership. And 3 years prior to that, we had Enron and all these things, right? So we have a saying in Japanese, "Nonoboto sugireba atsusa wasureru," which is, if it goes through your throat, right? And soon later you forget how hot it was, kind of thing. That's the saying, right? So I think the Harvard Business Review was trying to send a message, because on the cover of the Wise Leader, and we have absolutely no control over the title nor the cover sheet that they have. If you look very carefully, you have words like unethical manager written on the cover, fraud, greed, lack of integrity. That's on the cover of our article. And so the message, to at least how I've interpreted it, is "Nonoboto sugireba atsusa." So no wonder they're saying occupy Wall Street. And maybe that's kind of a message that the Harvard Business Review wanted to send. Now, to answer your question, I think we are on to a new capitalism, is what I think the Harvard Business Review is trying to say. And maybe the new capitalism is the soft assets that you were talking about. And maybe, it's not so much the Wall Street driven. And you've got to understand, Harvard Business School is the gongge of Wall Street, greed and fraud. So thank goodness we have a new dean who's Indian, and he was appointed the same year, the same day as I was. He teaches leadership and ethics. So Nitin Noria became the dean of the Harvard Business School, the first non-Caucasian to be the dean of the business school. And he, I think, wanted to send a pretty clear signal that we're not going to go the greed and fraud and unethical and lack of integrity route. And maybe it's time to look at Eastern philosophy, because many of the companies that have been around for over 300 years, and there are about 700 of them in Japan. When we talk about, the problem with business school professors, when you start talking, they don't stop. So you got to tell me, hey, stop there. Because we talk about corporate governance in business school. And, Japan adopted the U.S. format. But corporate governance in these companies that have been around more than 200 years, one word, kakun, family values that have passed on down the generation. So, I've got my friends who are 17th generation of Toraya, the confectionery company, right? So they have kakun family edicts, values that they've been told from generations before. And, there's nothing written about all these detailed things you would find in legislation, but pure common sense. Sampo yoshi is an omi shonin, commerce people's values, right? So it's got to be the customers, it's got to be society and the company. Sampo, the three directions. So let me stop here. So I'm very much.
Thank you. That's a beautiful background for my next question.
Yeah, I have to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And that's one of the reasons I asked you the first question. Well, I think Hirotaka has rightly pointed out a very important point, which is changing right now, which is the concept of capitalism. And my question would be to Bruce, that when we're talking about choices, and